So for our third and final Lightning talk speaker for Women Trailblazers, it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Mallun Yen. Mallun was an early executive at Cisco, and she is also the co-founder of the SaaStr conference. So who of you guys here have attended the SaaStr conference? Probably a couple of you. Awesome. So we're excited to hear from the co-founder of one of the biggest tech conferences in the world, and also the founder of a community that I belong to, which is called Operator Collective. So with that, welcome Mallun.
Thank you, Nancy. Oops, I think I'm double mic'd then.
Oh, okay.
I've got this. Hi, and I have a clicker. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I am going to make sure this works first. So I'm Mallun Yen, and I have been a executive in a big company, as well as a founder of 4 companies that have had a big community aspect to them. So I'm here to share with you a little bit about how that came about, because if you had met me a long time ago, there's no way you would have thought I could have started anything that anyone would go to. So yeah, that's me. Did anyone, I don't know if they do this anymore, but right, they used to line everyone up and the shortest person was always on the end. Okay, they still do that. Okay, so yeah, you can always tell when I'm in the picture because I'm always in the bottom right-hand corner. And that is Garanimals. Did anyone have Garanimals outfits when they were little? So this is me when I was a kid. And so I was the third of fourth kids born to immigrant parents who really spoke very little English. And so the Western world was very foreign. I think many of you can probably relate. Things like, my parents used to tell me things like, no offense to the Western people in the room, but like Western people are untrustworthy. You can't trust them. They always lie. And why, you may ask? Because they would say things like, let's go to lunch, and like not follow up. Or say like, how are you? And not even like wait to hear an answer. So I grew up with like, you just can't trust Westerners, right? And then also when you grow up using chopsticks, when you go to college or do other things and they've got like forks and knives and things like that, I still have to do this, you know, to figure out which is my bread plate and my drink thing. Does anyone know, do you guys know this trick? Anyway, I find it very helpful still. So it was not, it was, I think, a very typical child of immigrants upbringing. And then it just got a little worse. So, yeah. So I actually, when I was putting together this earlier this week, this wasn't here. But I showed my daughter, I'm like, look, see, you wouldn't have been friends with me when I was little. And then she looked at me, she goes, is that a mustache? And I'm like, yeah, it was a mustache. Anyway, so yeah, that was me, like home perm. I was really short. I don't know if you guys have kids. 4 feet short is really short for being in 8th grade. And yeah, I mean, the glasses, like what my parents did to me, I don't know. They're the granny glasses that are like upside down, so like this. And so people always thought my glasses were upside down. And they were rose tinted because like they sprung for that when I was little. So that was pretty much me, and for a long time, that really was all that I was. Some people can rise above this and be like, okay, this is going to make me stronger. No, I was awkward. I was awkward for a very, very long time, and in fact, people don't totally believe it, but I'll give you some examples of how awkward I was. So in high school, I was one of the few people I know who didn't have any activities. And it wasn't actually for lack of trying. Like, I actually wasn't even one of those people who was so comfortable in their skin. Was like, I don't care, I'm totally just me. It's like, no, I wanted to be one of the popular kids. I just didn't know how to do it. So I tried out for cheerleading. Cheerleaders are popular. No, didn't make it, right? And I tried out for the musical. But I actually can't sing or dance. And when people say, no, surely you can't. I'm like, no, I can't. I didn't even make the chorus, right? Everyone makes the chorus in the musical. And you might ask, like, what about sports? Yeah, no. And especially because back then, right, they would pick teams. They would let the kids pick teams. And then, of course, who do you think was the last person to be picked? Yeah, it was me. And so, so that was kind of my beginnings. And I didn't really know how to learn, frankly, to even talk to adults for a long time, or even really talk to anyone. So how do you go from that to basically starting 4 thriving communities and companies? So CHIPS It started in 2005. It was started as a dinner group of 7 of us when I used to be an intellectual property attorney, actually. And it started as a dinner group of 7, and it's now 5,000 members and 15 chapters around the world. And not something I ever really started out to do, but I'll tell you a little bit about why all these things came about. And then RPX was the second company, which is founded in 2008. It was a venture-backed company that we took from 0 to 100 million in public in less than 3 years. And there was a big community and network effect aspect of it. And then SaaStr, which some of you may have been to or have heard of, and if you haven't, I hope you guys all come to SaaStr in San Jose in March. And SaaStr started out around a blog and sort of grew up organically from there, and now it's a venture fund. It's a 20,000 person conference once a year. It's got and a number of other events. And then Operator Collective is something that probably you guys haven't heard of because it's still stealth under the radar. We have not really made any public announcements. And all I'll say about that is right now it's a community of ultra-talented operators. I think many of you guys may be operators, operating executives. And it's mostly women and a few good men from diverse backgrounds. So at this point in my life, now I can say, yes, I know how to build communities. I know how to throw events. I know how to create clubs or companies or communities that people will have to come to. And I have to say that if I can figure out how to do this, basically anyone can. And I'm going to share with you some of the tips so you don't have to spend like 30 years experimenting. Okay, so let me ask you this. Why are communities important? Can someone tell me why do you think communities are important? Sorry? Belonging, right?
Tips you can trust. Support.
Right, and I think especially, I mean, I know we have a few good men in this room too, but I think especially as women, the way that we socialize, the way that we get energy, and the way that we get power is by being with others who are like us. And so yeah, communities are important, and communities are also critical, right, to building any business as well as your own career path. And so these are just some of the people that are part of the Operator Collective community. I don't know if you recognize some of the folks here. It's a pretty fun group of people. So communities, right? Communities are safe places, like someone said over here, right? They're safe places where you can network, you can meet people like you, and because communities tend to be ones that you can opt in, or that you opt into to participate, they are safe because they're people like you. And the resulting relationships that you have are oftentimes easier to build because of the fact that you're congregating about something that is similar to what is of interest to you. And one of the things that took me a long time to realize, because I always thought networking was a really icky word. I can actually say it now without cringing. But for a long time, I thought networking was a really not a very great thing that I ever wanted to do. I wasn't comfortable with it, as well as the fact that it just felt like it was too schmoozy. And so the way I think about networking is to just be deliberate about relationship building, right? Because there's always something interesting that you can find, an interesting connection with someone else, and it's not just about schmoozing for the sake of getting ahead. But the fact is, if you don't build relationships, it's very hard to get ahead because nobody is doing this on their own. It is about the connections that you make, the things that you learn from other people. So communities are important, as we know. And so what are some tips? So the number one, and I mean, I'm speaking to you guys here, which obviously you've congregated around a really big niche, which is product, but that's the key on where to start, which is find your niche, right? Don't go too broad. If you just said, look, we're going to try to get every woman who is within the first, 15 years of their career, right? It's like there's not enough glue to kind of keep you guys together. And then what I also like to do is focus on the underaddressed or the underrepresented. So CHIPS, which was my first community, right? I started out as an attorney in patent law, right? Super interesting, right? No, in patent law. And so that's what the community was about, which was women and patent law. Not that interesting, right? And not that sexy. But it was an unaddressed need, which is there were not that many of us back then. And so we just came together, and there was certainly no group to help us in the common challenges that we were facing. And also, what I also like to do is focus on the under-addressed, right? Operator Collective is about operators. We all know in the venture world, and we all know the venture world revolves around VCs, right, and founders. But what about the operators? The operators are the ones who are building and scaling up these companies. But in the VC world, we're not necessarily on the radar, right? Or we're not all tweeting to each other and putting each other on lists, and and all of that stuff that goes along with it. And so that's the first thing. And this is the same thing with, again, this is 4 companies that I've built now, this is the same thing you do when you build a product, right? Which is, what's the under-addressed need? What's the niche? If you try to go too broad, it's not going to work. Same thing when you're building a product. So a lot of these things are fundamentally, crossover to multiple disciplines. And okay, so start with the bellwethers. Okay, remember, I was not one of those people who threw a party or threw an event or had a club that people would just naturally show up to. So what do you do when you're one of those people who isn't, someone who people are attracted to? So you try to make friends with the people who are. So for Operator Summit, which is an event we threw together on about 4 weeks' notice with about 200 people, because when you throw a 20,000 person event, it's really easy to do a 200 person event. And so what did we start with? So we started with people that people wanted to hang out with. But instead of so this is Claire Hughes-Johnson, she's the COO of Stripe. Totally awesome. But instead of just inviting Claire, we're like, let's invite Claire's best friend, right? Layla, because they're gonna totally wanna hang out with each other, and it'll make for a really interesting talk. And so Stacy Brown-Philpott up there, and Erica Schultz, and Henry Ward of Carta, and then below here, right, is I knew that Jen Tejada and Eric Yuen are friends, and so I said, hey, let's throw them on stage together. I mean, it helps that over time I was deliberate about relationship building, or not deliberate and stumbled into it, and that I happen to know all these people too. But also, I know if I throw an event and it's just like me up there talking the whole time, it's not like it's going to really attract that many people, even though I'm slightly less awkward today than I was when I was little. And so there's tricks that you can do to get busy speakers to want to come. So part of it is, who do they want to see that they typically don't get to see? And also, if you start with the speakers, that can help, because people generally like to give back and speak. But when you do it, but even when you invite speakers, let them know who else is speaking, who else is going to be there. And that oftentimes will get people over the hump to come. And so be deliberate too from the initial reach out. Not that it's possible to do a personal and tailored invitation when you are at 20,000 like SaaStr is, but when, for instance, with Operator Summit, which was a brand new event, we barely gave anyone notice and just decided we're going to do this event. We were deliberate from the very beginning, which is, how do we reach out? How do we reach out? Because think of all the random events you get invited to. Like, what are the chances, even if you see some great speaker, that you're actually going to come? Is we're very deliberate about it. We said, okay, Nancy, who else do you think might benefit from being as a part of this community and want to come to the summit? So then when we did reach out, especially when you're starting something new, again, just like you're doing a new product or a new business, which is, Nancy and I would like to invite you to join us at the following. Because what are you doing? You're making it safe. You're making it safe for that the introverts, the people who are too busy to come, the ones who have 5 million things going on, you're going to let them know, right? One, that Nancy's going to be there, so it's going to be Nancy and so and so and so and so. And so be deliberate about that very first invitation, and how you do follow up as well. And then, again, I was socially awkward, introvert, very uncomfortable in large crowds, and so forth. So what I also like to do is make it easy for people to participate. We did a few things. Like, we know that we have a lot of women in our community. We know we have a lot of women who have kids. This is a first-time event. We had it in San Francisco, so we decided to start it at 10 and end it by 4:30, because that allowed people to do drop-offs in the morning, right? That allowed people to do pickup if they needed to. It preserved the dinner time, because we all know how hard it is to fit in like another event. And so we do that. And also, as part of our community, when we do things like update calls and webinars and things like that, we schedule them at the time where we know people have just dropped off their kids, right? So we do like the update calls at like 8:30, and we'll schedule one at like 4:30. Or when they're on their way home. And so being deliberate about how do you make it easy for people to participate is really key to being able to have people adopt the community. The other thing that we've done is we give people jobs and roles. beyond being familiar with the personas, which is at SaaStr, this is called Brain Date Lounge. And what it is, it can be very hard when you're someone coming into a conference and you don't know anyone, right? And SaaStr, as well as Operator Collective, as well as CHIPS and all these communities, is about going out and meeting people and how do you foster one-on-one interactions with people, because when you have a 20,000 person conference, I mean, it can be very impersonal. And so we do things that are tech-enabled that allow you to do brain dates with each other. They're incredibly popular. And when we first started doing this, some people were like, this is an introvert's heaven, right? I can actually schedule people. We know exactly what the topic is, and it's only 20 minutes or 15 minutes, right? So there's lots of things that you can do like that. We also did things like office hours, which is, and oftentimes office hours are like one-on-one office hours. But what we did, again, to foster community is that we didn't just put like one CTO at the table. We actually put like 5 of them because they all wanted to hang out with each other too. And so they had a lot more fun. And then we had a lot of new folks, other folks who were not doing office hours who were participating, but we did them as groups. And that makes it, again, a lot less scary for people who, like me, were uncomfortable in positions where it was like, just one-on-one. And so the final point is, again, like any product, like any business, like any company, is you need to obsess about every single detail, which is what is the user experience from the time that you buy, right? From the time that you get invited, from the time that you check out, again, from a product, from how do you onboard. And that's what you do also with these events, because events are key to building a community as well, and a community, frankly, is key to supporting any product or business. And so you want to think about, how busy are you? What would you do? And just literally just obsess. And also by knowing the personas, like I said earlier, you can see that we did things like, there's some yoga up there and there's running. And then we ended the day with karaoke because we knew like a bunch of the people there actually can sing. I didn't sing. Actually, I did sing in a group, but like I didn't hold the microphone near me. So that is basically what you can do, and basically literally anyone can do this with a few tips, because now I have been able to build communities. I have been able to actually SaaStr itself is a business that's a community, right? It's not just a nonprofit, and you build it like any other product or company. And so, oops, there you go, hold on. It's not working, that's okay. Anyway, so that is what I wanted to share with you guys today, but thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions at all or any comments, yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, it was, there was a lot that happened in between, because it literally took me until I was like 30 before I was comfortable talking to adults even. Because in a lot of immigrant families, right, you don't talk about things like the world, right, or feelings or relationship building, right? I was just told, white people were evil. And so it took me a long time. And really what happened, and I think you've heard a lot about this today, there were a few people along the way who sort of recognized something in me, like far, far, far before I recognized anything in myself. And they sort of pulled me up and said, you know what, I still actually need to go back to them and be like, why? Right? Like I was utterly uninteresting. And so that was a big part of it. And then I think when you are so much an outsider, and even though now I'm, some people say, oh, you're an insider, you know everyone. I always feel a bit like an outsider. So you're always observing, and you're always saying, okay, well, how does somebody else do that? And so, so part of it was people took an interest in me, like, both male and female people who have both not only took an interest in me as mentors, but also as sponsors, to be like, you are going to get promoted to this position. You're the best one to do so. In fact, when I was at Cisco, I was promoted to VP of Worldwide IP. But at the time, there was only 2 of us in the department, and I was pregnant on maternity leave. We've heard of some pregnancy stories here, and this is why it's the importance of working for great people. Unfortunately, I'm of the view that you can only change people so much, right? So be deliberate about who you're working with. And so I was on maternity leave, And my boss decided to leave, and so they called me and said, hey, do you want to take over the job? And I was on leave, and I was like, oh, right, I'm like, I just wanted to cruise just for like a month, please. But the thing is right, you're not supposed to say that, right? But I was really like, just for like once in my life, let me just like take it easy. And so he says no, and I actually was sort of like that. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, but you know what, because it was my first child, I was like, this baby falls asleep at 6 o'clock every night. Like, I can't come home after the kid's already asleep. They're like, no, you can leave at 4 o'clock. I was like, okay. And then you're like, okay, and then I need this, and I can't go to China on 2 hours notice anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay. So it was inadvertently, I stood up for myself, and but it was out of sort of desperation. But what happened was they didn't have to give me that job. And if I didn't have a boss while I was on maternity leave who was willing to say, hey, she has all these demands and these conditions, but we're okay because we understand that she's going to be able to do this, then I wouldn't have ended up in the position. Because after I came back from leave, I was like, oh, I guess I'm kind of lucky I had the job, because all these people like tried to apply for this position from the outside who had done this job multiple times before, and my boss had the wherewithal to say like, no, she's the right one, even though she's obviously never done this before. So it was a few people like that, which is why sometimes when my kids often say like, Mom, why do you spend so much time helping people? I'm like, because you don't know like where I came from and how many people helped me to get to the point where I am. And so, yeah, I could go on for like days and days as to like what happened in between, but yeah, it was not pretty. Any other questions from anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic and impressive to see all the communities that you've started, because it's about the support that you give to others, right? My question to you is, do you handle all the 4 communities now, or how do you?
Oh God, yes. So I'm actually really, really great at delegating and hiring teams, because I am not a masochist. Remember, I wanted to leave at 4 o'clock every day. So yes, when I start something, I tend to obsess about it. Like CHIPS, which was the only nonprofit in there, just sort of grew up and exploded, and we almost died. I mean, maybe Nancy, you can relate to that, right? Because you don't understand what you're sitting on, and then we literally almost died trying to manage this, because the 4 of us were like the head of IP at Cisco, Google, Apple, and like Intuit. So we had pretty busy jobs, as all of you guys have, but we were utterly clueless. In fact, I joke, but it's not a joke, that we had never planned a big event before. So we planned a like 300-person conference in 4 weeks, because we're like, how hard is it? Like, all you do is like reserve the hotel and like order some food, because none of us had even had big weddings. Like, yes, this is why I'm like, you can save all this trouble, right? Nobody was as clueless as I, so CHIPS we've turned over to the next generation. I started that 15 years ago. RPX, we took it public from the beginning to the end, and we actually ended up selling it back to private equity. It was kind of a weird public company, so I'm not involved with that anymore. SaaStr, I still am somewhat involved, but I actually, the blogger behind SaaStr is my husband, Jason. I don't know if some of you guys follow him. He's very active. But we're not one of those couples that are like, let's start a company together. Like, yeah, no, we're both alphas. This doesn't really work that well. And so what happens, as happened with a lot of the things that I've done, which is we sort of just happened to do it on the side, and then it became this big business, so that I did spend the last kind of a couple of years like digging in, because we just needed to figure out how to operationalize it and get it to a point where it could scale. And now I'm not very active at all, which is great. Like, I love to make myself irrelevant. And so Operator Collective is something that I spend 150% of my time with now, because we're launching in about a month. Great. Yeah.
I have a question around fostering relationships in person versus digital. Can you talk a little bit about what makes those long lasting, from like going from
Yes.
strangers to friends?
Yeah, so much, because right, there's studies that say, right, unless you have like X number of interactions, you won't ever become friends with someone. And so there's a couple things. Is when you so at this point in my life, right, I do get a lot of requests for coffees and things like that, and I have to be ruthless about my time, because if I can't get this community off the ground and going, we're not going to be able to achieve everything we're going to do. But that being said, right, I have a soft spot for it, so I try and make as much time as I can for it. But so what makes it valuable is not when someone says, so I've had people who've come who've emailed me post events like this, not to scare you all off, which is like, hi, I really liked what you said. Will you be my mentor? And you're like, oh, like, like that's like even scary to me, right? I'm like, no, right? You can't, it's like any relationship, you have to build it. You can't suddenly be like this, because like, I mean, as much as I would love to mentor the entire world, right? I can't do that. And so I feel for the person too, right? Because it's like they were socially awkward like me, because I might have done that saying, I'm gonna be brave, right? And I'm gonna do this because everyone's telling me to be brave. And then it's like, oh shit, that didn't work. And so there's things that you can do, which is like, not that I'm telling you guys all to do this, but there could be things like, well, so fundamentally, people have egos, okay? As much as, so when you do things like follow people on Twitter, or you post them, post things which they are. This is why I'm laughing, because it's like, or interesting things that they've said, or in a talk, or in a, or something they've written about. So people tend to notice, right? As well as if you're going to ask me for a coffee or something, like give me a reason to make it valuable for me too. Because I make a lot of intros, and I get a lot of joy out of making intros for people. And in fact, I say if I wasn't doing this, I would just be a matchmaker in another life. But what I do is it has to be valuable for both sides. And if I don't know whether it's valuable, I might ask you like, well, you need to rewrite this, right? Or you need to tell me why this is useful for her or him too. And so that and again, it all comes back to being like socially awkward and not having anyone ever want to spend time with you, which is what is it going to make it valuable for the other person when they have lunch with you to want to come back and do that again? How can you help them as much as they're helping you, or anything? I also think that one great way of getting to know people is to collaborate on things like this. Right? If you're actually working with someone on planning an event or otherwise, you're automatically in a zone where you can collaborate and have a reason to come back again and again. All right. Anything else, or do we need to wrap it up, Nancy? Any other questions or comments? Oh, hi.
I just want maybe, if you can expand a little bit, you said, if you want to reach out to someone in a networking context, you would try and be helpful to them. But oftentimes, I would say, most people in this room would be on the more junior side, where you kind of want something from someone who's a bit more senior. So what are the things that are helpful for someone who's a bit more senior that can come from a more...
Oh yeah, a lot of things actually. So for instance, with Operator Collective, we're trying to, but you don't know this, right? So you can try to, but I'll give you an example so that you know. So a lot of us have things beyond our job, right? Because it's not like you can be like, oh, how can I help you at your company, right? That doesn't work. But you can look at the things like, you do have to kind of stalk people a little bit, right? To see like, what are they interested in, what are they working on, so that you can understand what that persona is, and like, okay, if I was in this position, why would I take a meeting or a call or a coffee with this person? Obviously warm intros help, right? But it can also be like, for me, we're launching Operator Collective. There is so many things that we need to have done that I have no budget for. But luckily we actually have a fair number of volunteers who are part of it. But I don't, and in fact, I need to have some research done on something. And I keep thinking, gosh, this would be great for a junior person to get to work with us, but I don't actually have time to find one. And so there's some random inbounds that I'm getting. I'm like, oh, maybe this person could do it. And so it's making sure that you understand, like, what is that person working on, and saying, this is really interesting to me to X. If there's anything that I could help you on, here's some of the things that I've done in the past. So that I might look at that and say, wow, she actually did research, right? And she actually understands maybe what I'm doing. And here, she's offering to help on something. It's not just about a coffee where it's just a one-way street. Yeah. Yeah.
This is related to product.
Yeah.
So, early stage. How important is it the community before or after a product?
Oh, huge, right? I mean, look at Dreamforce, right? I mean, the community and the events, right? And events and communities are kind of together. But yeah, it's incredibly important to it, because when you have the most successful products and the most successful companies, and so Zoom, I have the good fortune of having known Eric Yuan, the founder and CEO of Zoom, for many years. People love, I mean, don't you guys love Eric? Right? I mean, like, people love Eric and people love the company, and now they have this community around it. And so when you can have an emotional attachment actually to like video conferencing, or for, right? Or like chips, patent law, which is what we created, and RPX was also an IP company too. That's where you have this loyalty and this intense loyalty to the company and the brand and the products, and you'll continue to come back and back again, and you'll be forgiving. And in some ways, it's confirmation bias, right? Which is like, oh, I love this company. Oh, well, you know, there was a little camera issue with Zoom, but we still love this company, right? And so it's incredibly, incredibly important to build a successful company, to be able to build a community around it.
Community before product?
No. So
I guess that's
okay, so 2 of my companies we built, well, let's ignore the nonprofit for now. The 2 of my companies, we actually built community before product, okay? So SaaStr was community, and then now it's the business itself is actually events and online learnings. And then a venture fund grew out of that. And then RPX was the company, and then the community, because it was about, frankly, working together as a community to be able to harness collective intelligence efficiently, gather that data to make better decisions, and then generate great returns. And so community came after that, but it was always supposed to be a part of it. Now, again, you guys don't have to do 4 companies to get to the point where I am now, which is with Operator Collective, with the thing that we're announcing in about a month. I knew that a community was a strong piece of it, so I started building this community in parallel from day one. And so there's not one order of things. If you can, because it takes a long time to build a community, and also so I would say in a typical startup, you pretty much will build the product first, but start thinking about community early. And in fact, at SaaStr, for those of you who've gone, it's a lot about like sharing learnings and mistakes, and like I wish I knew this because it's really hard starting companies. And almost uniformly, what everyone says is, I wish I had a user conference earlier. And even Eric says that, because I asked him on stage, I was like, Eric, like what keeps you up at night? Does anyone have idea what keeps Eric up at night? He's like, nothing. But when I did ask him if there's anything that you would have done differently, the one thing that he did said is, I would have had a user conference earlier. So it's hard to, sometimes it's hard to build a community without a product. Because remember, you need a focus and you need a niche. And it's also hard to justify the expense that you need to get to, right, to build a community without having the product vision. But also sometimes it's opportunistic when you have that community and you're like, oh, here's an opportunity, I can roll something out. Great. Last question, anyone? We have time for one more question, if anyone has one.
I have a question for you.
Okay. Sure, maybe we can, I'll go fast.
Okay.
We'll
Is
take
there
care.
something you would do differently? The same question you asked Eric.
Actually, no. I wouldn't. It's not that it's been easy, right? A lot of things have been very hard, but but every single thing has made me more able to get to the next stage. And in fact, the thing that I always did that I recommend that you all do, and I don't do things with a lot of planning sometimes, it's just like you get thrown into it, is that I built these things. Like I was an intellectual property attorney. I had no business starting a company. Like what do I know about starting a company, building a business? And so what I used to have a boss, again, it's good to have bosses who believe in you, who said, like, I think it's great. Like actually, even my first job as an IP attorney, I actually one of the few IP attorneys that doesn't have a technical degree. And I was like, are you crazy? Right? But he was like, this is great. Like you think outside the box. And inside I'm like, that's because I don't know enough to even know what the box is. And that's what I've done kind of all my life, which is this next thing that I'm doing, because I don't come from this area, was like, oh, because you don't know what the box is, you're not constrained by the rules. And in fact, that's where you can come up with the best ideas and the best innovations, because otherwise you're just doing the same thing that everyone else is. Real quick, one more, and then.
Oh, my question was, you mentioned having a boss that acted as a sponsor for you. As a leader, what inspires you to sponsor younger employees?
So I think the biggest thing is probably attitude, right? Being willing to learn and wanting to have feedback. Because if you think you know everything already, I mean, no one knows everything already. And so someone who's willing to come back to ask for feedback, I mean, very few people, especially as someone who's earlier in their career, there's very few people who are senior at your companies who are not going to spend the time to do that if you have that kind of attitude. So first and foremost, I look for attitude, and that's what I do for any of the companies also that I work with or invest in too. Anyway, thank you guys so much for having me. Congratulations on building this. Thank you.